Hi guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another episode of Conqueror's Blade. So today I wanted to talk about premium units or mercenary units, because there was something that was introduced kind of a while ago into the game, and then we've not really had any more introduced since. And while I talked about them quite a bit at the time, it's something that's kind of since fallen by the wayside, and then as new people have come in, a lot of people don't really know a lot about them. Don't particularly know which ones are good to get, which ones aren't, and kind of what they do. So before we just sort of briefly talk about each one and sort of cover which one would be the one I'd get and which ones would be the one I'd avoid, I just wanted to briefly touch on what they actually do. So by owning a mercenary unit, or more specifically by taking a mercenary unit into battle with you, you gain plus 10% to everything, basically. So you get 10% more bronze income, you get 10% more honour income, 10% unit experience, 10% hero experience. So it's basically like having a third of a premium account. Now, you don't actually have to bring that unit out specifically in the battle. You don't have to spawn in with it. But so long as it's in your roster, so long as it's in your 700 leadership, when you spawn into that battle, then you'll get that plus 10%. And you'll see it gets introduced in the battle as like a little icon just above your health bar. So it's well worth actually getting one of these and using them, because for the 10% you get, that's a third of a premium account. And, premium account can be pretty expensive to run, and you can get these guys with silver, or you can pay sovereigns if you like. And it's a permanent bonus, and you only really need one, because the bonus doesn't stack. So you only really need to get one of these, with the cheapest being 250,000 silver, and then you're going to get that 10% bonus. And basically you can take that unit into battle with you all the time, and you're going to permanently get that third of a premium account free. Or if you already run a premium account, it basically takes the bonuses from 30% to 40%. So in my opinion, it's well worth using a mercenary unit, because they don't even take up very much leadership. So currently there's 5 mercenary units in the game. We've got the archers, the javelins, the muskets, the pikes, and the spearmen. So they're all different unit types. You can go and have a look at them in the barracks. So when you buy them, they all start off naturally as a max level unit. Ignore the fact I strangely ended up with 2 archers. It's a funky glitch. But they all start off as max level, so there's no leveling to do with them. They won't absorb any unit experience or anything like that. But they come with a veterancy line, but that veterancy line comes sort of fully upgraded. In effect, the veterancy line, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference, even though it sort of talks about, having this veterancy line. In effect, their stats are just sort of written out as you see them, and this veterancy line is almost irrelevant. They aren't necessarily particularly powerful units for their tier. None of them are amazing. You're not buying these guys. It's not World of Tanks. You're not going to be buying these guys because it's an overpowered premium unit. You're buying them for the 10%, not for their abilities, for example, in these guys as an archer, because they're a pretty crap archer. In this case, these guys get a piercing armor penetration of 798. That is bad. It's woefully too low, and with no veterancy line to upgrade, you can't really improve that by, you can slap a doctrine on them and get them up to sort of 870 or something like that. It makes them a pretty poor unit because they can't apply much damage, because they don't have the sufficient armor penetration to do so. They do get a little bit of a poison buff in the form of this poison arrow, but it's on a 60-second cooldown and it applies for like 5 seconds. So yeah, not amazing. So they're not an amazing unit, but they only cost 100 leadership, and that 10% is well worth 100 leadership in my opinion. So hopefully you're now sold on why you need a mercenary unit, or why you should be wanting one. And considering they're all currently affordable for silver, they're actually pretty accessible. And this is one thing that kind of surprised me a little bit about this game, is that, most games you actually have to pay real world money to get this sort of stuff. These are all achievable by silver. So I think these archers here are 250,000 silver. And then we got things like the Javelineers, I think around 400,000 silver. Up to, I think it's the Black Dragon Pikemen are the most expensive, and I think they're around 700,000 silver. So all of them are attainable. Although if you're new to the game, that may seem like a pretty unsurmountable amount of silver. It's certainly not. As you play the game more and more, you'll find your silver slowly starts to build up. I've currently got 1.2 million, and that's just naturally. I've not boosted that in any way. That's just what's occurred from playing sieges, selling equipment I get, territory wars, etc., etc. So, which one is the best to buy? So for me, for the number 1 spot, there are 2 possible contenders for different reasons. In terms of the best unit to play, the nicest ones to play, it's quite easily for me the Javelineers. These guys are genuinely, if we go back and find them in the barracks, where they gone, these guys are genuinely quite nice. I should probably upgrade these from common doctrines to actually some half-decent doctrines, because I can certainly make them slightly better. So they play like a standard Javelineer unit, and there's a couple of things about them that make them nice. They basically get 2 to 3 Javelin tosses. They're a 30-man unit. If the full unit survives, then basically you get 3 Javelin tosses, but if you lose a man or 2, then that basically drops down to 2. The Javelin tossers, because you're going to be fighting relatively high-tier enemy units, particularly at this sort of very late stage in the game, and these are only a 3-star unit, a high armor penetration of the Javelins and their high damage means that they contend pretty well, even when you're fighting things like Reapers or Halberdier Sergeants or other relatively high armored units. You know, you can throw these Javelins and you'll still do a really good chunk of damage in a way that something like the Archers or, you know, the melee ability of the other units doesn't really apply. So these guys do have the potential, at least, to cause damage to higher tier units, and that makes them useful, because otherwise you end up just coming up against a unit of Reapers or, you know, another high tier unit of Palace Guards or whatever it may be, and they'll just end up slaughtering you, whereas these guys can at least cause a reasonable amount of damage. Secondly, they also get some pretty nice formations. They get a shield wall formation, which puts them into a really nice tight little shield wall. Yes, in a way it makes them more vulnerable, but it does mean that they can get really tight Javelin volleys. You know, as well, the fact Javelin volleys will one-shot heroes if you hit them, which makes quite a nice unit. They're not amazing in melee. They do get this little flying shield ability, which is basically, as they're fighting, they sort of stab a bit the Javelins and then they throw their shield at someone, which is kind of cool to see, but it works pretty effectively. But, you know, all in all, they're not going to stand up particularly well in melee, but they're fine if, you know, you come across a unit of Archers or something you need to just kill. They do work, but yeah, not the most amazing melee unit. But out of the 5 mercenary units, they're easily, for me, my favourites. So why is there then 2 contenders? What's the second option? Well, it has to be the Black Dragon Archers. And everything I said about them earlier is true. They are quite a bad archer unit, mostly because, in my opinion, for that penetration. And the fact the poison arrow is their kind of main ability, you know, that's what kind of makes them special. There's this poison ability, has a 60-second cooldown. It's far too long to make it a useful ability, and it runs for a far too short a period of time to make it nice. So that kind of ruins them in terms of a combat aspect, although they're not the worst combat unit out of this roster. But more importantly, the thing that makes them good is the fact that they cost 100 leadership, and they are only 250,000 silver. If you're only interested in that 10% buff, the Black Dragon Archers are fine. They're a 32 stack unit. They get quite a lot of them. And yeah, they do run fine. They look kind of badass as well. I like them with the little sort of scimitar falchion type of sword they have. But yeah, they're not an amazing combat unit, but they could be worse. You know, if you can stick them at the back and get them to shoot in, then you know, they will at least rack up a bit of damage, particularly against lighter targets. It's just against heavier stuff, you're really not going to be applying a great amount of damage. So for me, that makes the 2 top spot units, Javelineers and the Archers. If you can afford it, the Javelineers are much better. If you just want the 10%, Black Dragon Archers are actually fine, and they're really not that bad a unit. So from there, where do we go? What's the sort of second place? And again, kind of like first, I'd say there's 2 contenders, or it's pretty close between second and third, between the Pikemen and the Spearmen. So the Pikemen play, in my opinion, an awful lot like the Prefecture Pikemen. So these guys here. So if you've ever played these guys, you'll kind of get a bit of an idea of how they play it. Actually, ironically, these guys are right above them. They get a really nice charge, sort of. They get a really nice anti-hero charge. If you manage to hit 2 or 3 enemy heroes with your pikeman charge, you'll more than likely kill them. And in that sense, it's quite effective. But the charge tends to lose a lot of momentum quickly once it hits units, particularly shielded units, and tends not to push through. The units themselves don't have a great deal of health on them, so they tend to die pretty fast. They don't have any shields, so they don't hold up so well in combat. You know, their health of 5,300 just isn't all that great nowadays. And their defensive stats are just shocking. I mean, 200 for piercing. I mean, they're just going to be every archer. Even the Black Dragon Archers can cause quite a bit of damage to these guys because their defensive stats are so low. They don't have a brace ability, which kind of limits them quite a lot in terms of any sort of anti-cav roll. Well, it basically means they have no anti-cav roll. So it's all about that charge. And while it's a great anti-hero charge, it's not a particularly great anti-unit charge. And they cost 700,000 silver, which in my opinion kind of makes them not worth it. In a way, kind of makes them not worth it to buy, in my opinion. If it was up to me, I wouldn't bother with these guys. So then we also get these Black Dragon Spearmen. These guys aren't so bad. I think these are 400,000, I'd have to double check. But they're not so bad. So what makes these guys okay? Well, they're not great. They're very equivalent to Spear Militia, but they do get a self-heal, which is what kind of makes them nice. So they restore 250 health over 15 seconds, similar to the Imperial Spear Guard. But their self-heal is actually pretty decent. They don't get an immense amount of health, 6,000. You know, because they've got a veterancy line already sorted, there's no great way in which you can increase that. The only way to be to throw, say, a Spear Doctrine on them. You know, I think you actually have a rare Spear Doctrine. You could throw on them, yeah, 360 health. So you're going to get them up into the low 6,000s. They'll hold up a bit. They don't have amazing stats, although, as you can see already, you know, a good chunk better than the Pikemen. You can certainly knock this slashing one up into the 400s if you're using Doctrines. And, of course, their offensive stats are woeful, but that's really not what they're about. They are a 32-man stack unit, so you do get quite a few of them. And, of course, they have huge shields, so they will stand up and block archers and things like that. So they do at least have a use, in my opinion. They can at least sort of hold the line, be a blocking unit, one of those units that gets in the way, and sort of combine that with the self-heal. They do hold up a little bit, but the self-heal has quite a long cooldown, and, you know, they're not going to be sort of standing up against the enemy forever. So, yeah, sort of similar to a Spear Militia, but with that self-heal. So they're a fine unit, but not necessarily something I'm going to be readily bringing into combat all the time. And then we move on to the worst. Easily the worst. People still buy these thinking they're going to be nice. They are horrific, the Sea Stag Death Dealers. Do not buy the Sea Stag Death Dealers. They're easily the worst unit in my opinion. Why is that? Well, firstly, they're a 21 stack unit. Really quite small, even for a musket unit, but when you compare it to like the 32 stack archers and stuff like that, it makes them pretty terrible. On top of that, they have so little health. Honestly, if you sneeze on them, they will die. These are the most hopeless units. The piercing and armor penetration is really quite good, and that's what I think draws a lot of people in. You look at them and think, oh wow, these guys can do a lot of damage. You know, musket unit, they're gonna be quite effective against units. They honestly couldn't hit a barn door if they put their gun up against it. They are so inaccurate. It is just unbelievable. They can't hit anything. They have no real abilities. You know, they're just a focus fire in a specific direction. They are just horrifically inaccurate. They die to absolutely everything. You know, if anything explodes near them, if an archer shoots an explosive arrow in the middle of the unit, the whole unit will die. They're just hopeless. They really aren't what they look like. So I would strongly say that these are easily, for me, the worst of the mercenary units, and certainly want to avoid, because there are much better options out there. For me, the Javelins, that's really the way you want to be going. So anyway, that's really all I've got. I just wanted to kind of touch on these and run over these guys so people have a bit of an idea of what actually they're about. Kind of just cover them in, you know, which one's the best, which one's the worst, at least in my opinion. These are the guys you want. If you can't afford them, the archers are the most attainable one and certainly far from the worst one there. So they're a pretty good, you know, second option if you can't quite afford these ones. But if you can, Javelineers are the way to go. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. If you have any sort of difference of opinion, do you have a premium unit that you really like, that you think I'm being unfair against? Do you like the Sea Stag Death Dealers? If you do, you're strange. But do let me know in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel for a load more Conqueror's Blade content, and I shall see you guys all in the next video.